Welcome to your last module, Evolution and Natural Selection. Now, it may seem to you like evolution and natural selection is just yet another module, but the reality is this really brings everything together. This is why we learned all the other things first. Some teachers may tell you, and I did that too when I was first teaching, um, that we talked about the theory of evolution and about the fact that the word theory really means something different in biology and science than it does in English. But that really doesn't matter because the reality is, not the theory, the reality is that the theory of evolution is the very best explanation we have for the observations that we make in the real world. The theory of evolution explains it all. It explains that creatures living in the natural world have a lot of things in common. We talked about a lot of the things that that we have in common with all life on Earth. We all made from the same set of macromolecules. Some viruses use RNA. They're not very closely related to us, and they're not really alive either. Um, so we have a lot of things in common. The same macromolecules, the same sets of DNA. You've all heard that we share 98.99 point something percent of DNA with a chimpanzee. Um, but did you know that we share DNA basically with bacteria? There are genes that are so important that they have not changed since bacterial times. We use these changes to see how closely related we are. And we also use these sequences that we can see from a bacterium on. We use the changes to decide which sequences, which sections were really important and which were not. The ones that are the same between bacteria and us, chances are they were needed for something. The ones that changed, they were decorative or they did something else. So that's what we all have in common. At the same time, you need to just look out the window to see that these building blocks created a massive amount of diversity. The tree is made from the same DNA you are. The bug that's flying outside of your window is made from the same DNA you are. We have the same structures. Our cells have the same molecules that make them up, the same structures inside of each other. We have so much in common. There's got to be a way how this came about. And how this came about was via evolution and natural selection over millions and millions of years. So that's what we're going to talk about this time. Chapter 13 talks to you about the genetic variation, natural selection. It's the big chapter that you really need to try to understand. The big thing about evolution that students have a hard time with is the cause and effect relationship. As humans, we like to think of cause and effect. And when we think of cause and effect, we think of it in terms of it got cold, therefore I'm going to put a jacket on. Cold is the cause, I'm putting a jacket on is the effect. In natural selection and evolution, this cause-effect relationship is reversed. If it gets cold and I'm an animal without fur, I can't all of a sudden decide to grow fur. That it doesn't happen fast enough. So the fur has to predate the change. So you have to have fur before it gets cold. So the cause is having fur. The effect is when it gets cold, you live. Because if you didn't have fur, you would die. So your cause and effect relationship is reversed. Nobody grows fur in order to, right? The environment changes and therefore I did. No, no. Your chains has to be in place. When COVID hits, it's too late to try to become resistant. When COVID hits, those who are not resistant die. Nature is cruel. Nature has no problems wiping out an entire species. It's just recycled. The molecules go back in the ground. The energy goes, becomes heat. It's all good. We didn't really need that species anyway. And the same thing is true for humans. If we manage to destroy this earth one day, nature's fine. They'll just, recycle us for other purposes. Not a problem. So this is what we're talking about this week. The module activities, there's a little bit of reading you've got to do. You don't have to read 14, 15, and 16 in great big detail. 13 is the big one. The others, read bits and pieces. Mastering biology, complete the assignments 13 through 16. Then look at the demonstration section, and I'll walk you through all of that. The rabbit natural selection game is kind of a fun little game, and then we're going to talk about it. I'm going to tell you what I mean with write an evolution story here. The background and lecture material, as usually, is found here. You've got a tour guide that tells you a little bit what to focus on and what not so much. And here in the assignments, you find the bunny activity. So there's this is the document you need, and you should probably look at this document because I think it helps you understand what the questions are that are in the quiz, which is where you're going to answer these questions. But we'll walk through these individually. In the demonstrations for evolution, read through this. I wrote this, trying to explain to you this cause and effect relationship. And when I'm asking you to write the evolution story, I'm trying to get you to write something like similar to what I wrote there about the lizards or about horses or whichever organism you would like to talk about. The assignments then are as follows. So you're going to read the chapters. You're going to, again, check the sample questions. Make sure you keep those for yourself. So chapter 13, there's a quiz. There's mastering. There's chapter 14 quiz. There's mastering. And then there's chapter 15 quiz. And once you finish chapter 15, the quiz, you're going to be able to get the content, access the content for part 2. Because as usually, I don't want you to actually look at the part 2 until you've understood part 1. Chapter 16 and 17, I'm probably going to make those bonus. So those are just the mastering, and I'm actually not going to ask you about those in the exam. So only do those if you feel like it, and there's not going to be a problem if you don't do them. Then here comes the bunny game, and I'm going to have you look at that assessment here real quick. So the bunny game, here's the activity. You just click on it. And if you click on the activity here, you'll get to the simulation. And basically what you're doing there is you got a bunny, you add a mate, and then you can run through this kind of quickly. And if you don't do anything else, then in 6 generations, the bunnies take over the world. Obviously, that's not a good thing. But what this activity then does, it allows you to play through different scenarios. So it tells you what to do, tells you to put the reset button. And So you start over, you can add wolves, you can limit food, you can add mutations, you can change the environment. So it has you go through and play some of these simulations. And in this quiz, I'm asking you to answer questions related to this. Now, if what you see is different from what this simulation tells you, like, like for example, if I ask you, describe the curve of, or how many of this do you have and how many of that, but in your case, the bunnies took over the world, so you can't tell, then redo it, because you should see the things that I'm asking you to see. If you don't see it, this computer program works the same every time. So if you don't see what I described that you see, then you did something wrong. Also, try not for the shortest answer in the world. You get credit for understanding. So if I need to discern if you actually understand the concept, or if you have that cause-effect relationship backwards. So that's the bunny game. Hang on, let me open this real quick to see. So that's the bunny game. And then here's the assignment for the natural selection evolution story. This content, once you get 8 points or more on chapter 15, you can access this content. And so I'm going to pause this real quick to get 8 or more points on chapter 15, and then I'll continue. So now that I've got more than 8 points on quiz number 15, I can open this. And these are just discussion boards this time around. So in this first one, I want you to come up with 3 lines of evidence for evolution. Expand, comment on a classmate, come up with different things. What kinds of things tell you evidence about evolution? Go back to your cell specialization topic. And now that you know more about evolution, do you have more to say about your cell specialization topic? What does antibiotic resistance have to do with natural selection and evolution? Similarly, viruses. How can viruses evolve, or do they evolve? What do they have to do with evolution when they're not even alive? And then last but not least, these are gimmies. What was the best thing you learned in this class, and what would you have wanted to learn more about? And that's all for this week.